Hi everyone, my name is Leah Kopke and I'm a 3D motion design freelancer. I also have a podcast where each week I cover another 3D modeling tool for Cinema 4D. Hello and welcome. Today we're going to go over the masking tools for sculpting inside of Cinema 4D. So let's go ahead and get started. Here we are inside of Cinema 4D. The first thing that I'll do is change from my standard mode to my sculpting mode. So we have all of our sculpting tools over to the left. I'm going to drop a sphere into the scene. I'll change it from being standard to hexahedron. And once I turn on garage shading lines under the display, you'll see that the nice thing about hexahedron is that it gives you all quads. So that's why we want to use this option instead of the standard. And once I do that, I'll increase the segments so that we have a nice higher poly model for sculpting on. You can always make it lower poly later. And once we do that, we need to make this editable. So you can hit this button here or use the C hotkey in order to make this object editable. And you'll notice that all of our brushes are no longer grayed out on the left side, but our masking brush still is. And the reason for that is you can't use your masking tools until you actually subdivide this and have a sculpting tag applied to the sphere. So when we switch over to our objects tab where we can see our sphere is here, just by clicking that up there, if we hit the subdivide, you'll see we get a sculpting tag right here added in, and this masking tool is no longer grayed out. So let's talk a little bit about what this masking tool even is. It controls what part of the mesh you're working on. So sometimes you just want to work on one area and not the whole mesh, so this tool comes in really handy. If I just click and drag my mouse over the mesh, you can see that it is creating this line here. And if I grab the draw tool, we've covered the draw tool in the past, I'm going to increase the strength a little bit so you can see what's happening here. I'm not able to affect the part that is already masked out. So for those of you who are new, in another episode we went through all the settings for the sculpting tag, and we went through what sculpting layers are, as well as the draw tool. So if this is a lot of new information for you and you want to learn those other topics in depth, I'm going to leave videos to all of those, or links to all those videos in the description below. So no worries if this is a little bit overwhelming if you're just joining us. So this is useful for that. You can also remove parts of the mask by holding down Control, and that'll kind of, in a sense, erase your mask. And another important thing to keep in mind for this, I'm going to hit undo again, that's Control Z on PC or Command Z on Mac, is that you can hold a click on this and see more options for your mask. You can invert your mask. So it does as it sounds, it inverts it so that you're affecting it the opposite way. I'm going to hit undo. You can clear the mask, which just removes it entirely. Or you could even go ahead and hide the masked section. You can show the masked section. So it gives you a lot of control, and if you want to just focus on one part of your model and it's hard to see, this is a really nice way to be able to do that and control what part of the mesh you're working on. So that's why sometimes you want to hide a part of the mesh. Like if you were just working on the detail of a character's arm and their torso was getting in the way, maybe you want to hide their torso so that you can just focus on 3D modeling the arm. And there's some other options in here. You'll notice that our default color for our mask right now is gray, but it doesn't have to be gray. You can make it any color you want to. So if I click on the sculpting tab, the sculpting tag here, you can change the color to lime green if you want, anything you want in here. you can change it to. You can also adjust this within the masking tool itself. Under the settings here, you'll see mask color, and you can change it here as well. So it's optional how you'd like this to look here. There's some other really great tools in here. You can also blur out a mask by holding Shift with the masking tool, and you can see that this is becoming blurred out and it's not as hard of a masking line as before. Control removes. Without Control, it adds to the mask, and Shift blurs it. You can also have different masking modes. So I actually want to show that on a plane. So let's go ahead and drop a plane in here to talk about how that works. I'll hold a click on this cube, drop in a plane, and I'll increase the segments over here. I'm going to hit the C hotkey to make it editable again. And once we do that, we're going to go ahead and subdivide it so that it gets a sculpting brush tag over here. And then we can click on Show Layer Manager within the Sculpting tag so that we get taken over to our Sculpting Layers tab, and we can see options in here. And I'm going to just move this object over. So I'm in model mode. I'm going to hit the E hotkey. I'm just going to move this on over here so that we can see what we're working with. I'm going to subdivide this one more time, and you'll see we have another subdivision level added. And I'm just going to draw on here. You'll notice that we have this option here, mask. You can turn it on and off your mask also up here. And you can only have one mask per layer, for those of you who are curious about that. Now let's talk a little bit more in depth about the mask modes. I think this is easy to see if we have a little bit of detail on this mesh. So I'm actually going to talk a little bit about the stencil here. We've gone over the stamp settings in the past and the stencil settings. All of those are available for your masking tool as well. I'm going to use the stencil for now. So let's go ahead and grab a texture for our stencil. I'll go into the window drop-down menu, and I'll click on Asset Browser, go down to Presets, Sculpt Brush Presets over here, and we'll scroll down. Click on the plus next to Texture so that we open up those folders there. I'm going to click on Deco Wood. And you'll see we have this one right over here. Going to drag and drop this one over here. And now you can see the stencil showing up. I'm going to hit the middle mouse button to come out of this view. And I'm going to go into this top view over here. Now you'll notice that this one looks a little bit different, so I'm going to make sure this is set to garage shading lines as well. We can see our stencil. It's a little bit large, so I'm going to do a combination of zooming in and scaling down this texture here. After I use the stencil to create the mask, I'm going to use the draw brush. So I'm going to first just fill this out with the mask. And then I want to invert the mask so that it's the opposite way. And then I'll use the draw brush, make the draw brush nice and big. And just fill in this area a little bit and raise it up. If we hit the middle mouse button, you can actually see how much this is being raised up from this perspective. That might be a little bit too much. I'll hit undo once. This is okay for right now. I just want to go through some more options here. So In our masking here, I'm going to turn off the stencil for right now, and so that the stencil is off, because we're going to use this as an example with the different mask modes. And right now we have the mask cleared. When I draw, it just goes over everything. As you can see here, when I change my mask mode to crevice, you can see that it only draws on the low points of the mesh, which is really cool to be able to control masking that way. You can also do the reverse with ridge. Now you can see that we're only really drawing on the high points of this mesh. Another interesting option is that you can choose this option flood, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that as well. So I'm just going to clear this so that we have a fresh start here. I'll click flood, and you can see it just floods the entire mesh so that it's entirely masked. Another option is to blur an existing mask. So if I draw a mask here and I want to blur that out, I can click this button here and it'll become a little bit softer, as you can see, along the edges. I'll hit undo a few times so that it goes back to the original. If I click mask sculpted, it'll only add a mask to the areas that have been sculpted on, which is really interesting that Cinema 4D can calculate that and knows which area is which, and it stores that information. There's also this option up here called fill. So let's talk a little bit about that. I'm going to clear this mask. I'll select fill, and if you click, it'll just fill in that whole area as a mask. You can also hit Control and click, and that'll do the reverse. It'll remove all the mask in that area. So that's a helpful tool to be aware of that's there. I'll change this back to all. And you can see that even if I drew a circle with the mesh, you can click there with fill and it'll just fill in that circle, whatever outline you have. So it's a nice easy way to fill in areas. Like, let's say you just want to mask off a character's arm, you could draw a circle around that arm, use the fill in the arm, and then if you just want to only work on that part, you could invert the mask and then choose hide masks, and you'd just be left with the part that you need. I'll change this back to show and clear the mask once again. And just to show you one more time the blur, you could see it softens the edges. It's a little bit easier to see with this example how it softens the edges. For this next example, I'm going to show how it works on the sphere. You can actually add in textures to use as a mask. So I'm going to show a little bit of what I mean right here. You can go ahead and create a legacy material. This works best with the legacy materials rather than the new ones. So I'm going to add in a new standard material from the classic materials menu. And with that done, I'll go into this texture drop down here. I'll click this little arrow. I'll go into sketch and tune, and I'm just going to add in the spots option. So now we have the spots in here. You can see the texture. That's what we'll be using. Now, in order to have this show up in the mask, we can do this a different way than the stamp or the stencil option. We can sample a material by dragging and dropping this texture. I'm going to name it dots. We'll drag and drop that into here. I am in model mode right now, and I'm going to go ahead and select sample. And now you can see that it added in all these dots, which is pretty cool. And if you remember, we made our mask lime green. Now I think this would look a little bit better if we had a higher resolution. So I'm actually going to hit undo, and I'm going to click the subdivide button a few times. And then I'll click sample again, and you can see these dots look a whole lot better with the higher subdivision. So it's just another really cool way to be able to mask out your mesh so that you can work on it and have a little bit more control and create some interesting textures. It's a lot of fun. It's a really helpful tool to know, so I hope this helps you on your future projects. And if you have any questions or comments or anything that you're wondering, please leave them in the comments below. If you'd like to learn more 3D modeling tools for Cinema 4D, I go over another one each week. You'll be notified if you hit like and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. Happy 3D modeling.